It all started with a stupid dare. I should have known better. Me, Jason, and Ellie were hanging out one night when Jason brought up the old asylum on the outskirts of town. He had that wild look in his eyes, the one he gets when he's about to do something reckless. "Dude, no one's been in there for years," Jason said. "I bet you can't last an hour inside." I laughed it off at first. I wasn't that desperate to prove anything. But Ellie, sitting there with her arms crossed, smirked. "What's wrong, scared?" she teased. That's all it took. I had to do it. How bad could it be? Just an old, abandoned building, right? Nothing to it. I grabbed a flashlight and my phone. "Fine," I said. 1 hour, and I'm out. We drove out there at midnight, the asylum looming in the dark, its windows shattered like jagged teeth. It already felt wrong, but I wasn't backing out now. "You got this, man," Jason grinned, slapping my back as I stepped out of the car. Ellie gave me a quick nod, but she looked a little more serious now. "I'll see you in an hour," I muttered, walking toward the front entrance. As soon as I stepped in, the door creaked closed behind me. The place smelled like rot and dust, like something had been left to decay for far too long. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows that danced on the walls, making the old graffiti and stains look like something alive. I wasn't scared. Not yet. Just uneasy. I started walking, my footsteps echoing in the massive, empty hallways. Every once in a while, the wind would howl through the broken windows, making this eerie whistling sound. My heart was beating faster than I liked to admit, but I kept moving. The place was massive. Long corridors with rusted metal doors, rooms that had been torn apart over time, and the occasional creepy wheelchair just sitting in the middle of nowhere. It was like a cliché horror movie set, except I was living in it. Suddenly I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. I froze, every hair on the back of my neck standing up. There shouldn't have been anyone here. I was alone, right? "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky, but no response. I stood still, straining to hear, but everything was dead silent again. Must have been the wind, I told myself. Just the wind. But then, there it was again. Closer. I spun around, my flashlight sweeping across the hallway. At the end of it, just for a split second, I saw someone, a shadowy figure disappearing around a corner. My throat tightened. "Hey, who's there?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. No answer. Okay, maybe this was just some local messing around. Someone who'd broken in before me. That had to be it. I wasn't turning back now. I was too stubborn for that. I started moving faster, following where I'd seen the shadow, but every time I thought I was getting close, it vanished again. Just out of sight, always around the next corner. By now, my nerves were shot. I wasn't sure if it was the creepy atmosphere or the fact that I couldn't shake this feeling that someone was watching me. But I started thinking about bailing. I'd been in here long enough, right? Just as I reached for my phone to check the time, nothing. No signal. Of course, I muttered under my breath. Great. Now I was stuck in this place without any contact. But fine. I'll just wait out the rest of the time and be done. Suddenly, a door down the hall creaked open on its own. I was trying to stay calm, but every step I took felt heavier. The long corridors seemed to stretch endlessly, and each corner I turned brought me deeper into the dark, cold belly of the asylum. My breath was shallow, the sound of it loud in the silence. That was when I saw it, the door at the end of the hallway, slightly ajar, creaking as if someone had just passed through. For a second, I thought about turning back. My flashlight was flickering more now, its weak beam barely holding on, but curiosity pulled me forward. The door felt like an invitation, but not the good kind. More like the kind that you know you should refuse, but you just can't. I approached it slowly, my shoes crunching on bits of broken tile and glass. The door was old, the wood swollen with age, and the paint peeling off like old skin. I nudged it open with my foot, and it groaned loudly, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Inside, the room looked like a typical patient's room. A single, rusted bed frame was pushed up against the wall. The mattress was long gone, leaving just the metal springs, twisted and broken. There was graffiti sprayed across the walls, old and faded, but that wasn't what caught my attention. What made my heart drop into my stomach was the voice. At first, I thought it was in my head, a faint, low whisper that seemed to come from nowhere. "Help me!" I froze in the doorway, gripping the flashlight tighter, trying to tell myself it was just the wind, just the building settling, anything but what it sounded like. But there it was again, a little louder now, clear enough to send a shiver down my spine. "Help me!" It was real. I wasn't imagining it. "Who's there?" I asked, but my voice barely came out. I sounded scared because I stepped into the room, and the floor creaked under my weight. My flashlight was flickering like crazy now, the shadows in the room growing taller, darker. I swept the light across the room, but there was no one there. It was empty, completely empty. The voice couldn't be coming from here, and yet, "Please help me." It was louder this time, and closer. So close, it felt like someone was whispering right in my ear. I spun around, shining the flashlight in all directions, but still, nothing. No one. My hands were shaking now, and I could feel cold sweat running down the back of my neck. My brain was racing, trying to find a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. This was supposed to be an empty building, abandoned for years. I couldn't explain what I was hearing. I didn't want to explain it. "Show yourself," I yelled, but my voice echoed back at me, mocking how small and scared I sounded. The voice didn't respond this time. The room was silent again, so still that I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I took a few steps backward, out of the room, not daring to take my eyes off it. Something was wrong with this place. Deeply wrong. Then, as I reached the doorway, I heard it again. But this time, it wasn't a whisper. It was a soft, chilling giggle. A child's laugh, but twisted, like it had come from a throat not used to laughing. I stumbled out of the room, my legs feeling like they'd turned to jelly. My mind was screaming at me to get out, to leave the asylum and never look back, but something wouldn't let me move fast enough. It was like I was stuck in a nightmare, my body heavy and sluggish. The door to the room slammed shut behind me. I jumped, dropping the flashlight for a second before fumbling to pick it back up. It was pitch black now, the dim light barely working, but I forced myself to stay calm, or at least pretend to. The laughter was gone, but the silence was worse. It was thick, like the air had turned heavy with something I couldn't see, something lurking just beyond the edge of my vision. I ran my hand along the wall, trying to find my way back to the main hallway, my thoughts racing. I needed to get out of here, needed to find the exit, but the asylum felt different now. Like it had shifted, changed its layout just to trap me inside. And then, from the darkness behind me, came the whisper again. But this time, it wasn't asking for help. It was different, darker, more threatening. "Don't leave." I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I didn't want to turn around, didn't want to see whatever was behind me, but I couldn't help it. Slowly, almost against my will, I turned the flashlight toward the source of the voice. The beam flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. Total darkness. I was left standing there, blind, my heart racing so fast it felt like it would explode. I could feel something. Something was there. Close. And then nothing. The air shifted, the pressure lifted, and it was like whatever had been there was gone. The room was silent again, as if nothing had happened. My hands were trembling so badly, I could barely hold onto the flashlight, but I clicked it back on. The beam returned, weak but steady. I didn't waste any more time. I didn't want to find out what would happen next if I stayed. With shaky legs and a pounding heart, I turned and bolted down the hallway, not caring which direction I was going, just desperate to put distance between me and that voice. I wasn't sticking around to see who or what wanted me to stay. I ran down the corridor, my breath coming in short, panic bursts, trying to remember the way back to the entrance. My flashlight's beam bounced erratically as I moved, casting weird, shifting shadows that only made everything worse. The place was starting to feel like a maze, the hallways twisting in ways they hadn't before. Every corner I turned felt wrong, like I was somehow going deeper into the asylum instead of getting out. My mind was spinning. That voice, that thing, whatever it wasn't human. I couldn't explain it, and I didn't want to. All I knew was that I had to leave. The air felt thicker, like the walls themselves were closing in. I kept glancing over my shoulder, convinced that any second I'd see something following me. Something dark, something I didn't want to face. But no matter how fast I moved, the asylum seemed to change around me. Hallways stretched longer than they had before. Rooms appeared that I hadn't noticed earlier, and each turn brought me further from where I thought the entrance should be. It was like the building itself was messing with me, shifting, trapping me inside. The flickering light from my flashlight wasn't helping. Every few seconds, it would sputter, casting me in total darkness, only to snap back on, weaker than before. My grip on it was so tight, my knuckles ached. I knew if it went out for good, I'd be lost in the dark, alone, with whatever was lurking in this place. I tried every door I passed, but each one was locked, the handles cold and unyielding. Some of the doors looked like they hadn't been opened in decades, covered in rust and grime, while others looked newer, as if someone had locked them recently. I didn't want to think about what could be behind them. I just wanted out. As I pushed on, I started hearing things, little noises like the scuffling of feet behind me, or soft whispers that I couldn't quite make out. My skin crawled with the feeling that I wasn't alone, even though every time I turned around, there was nothing. It was as if the building itself was alive, watching me, playing with me. "Come on, where is it?" I muttered to myself, my voice shaky. I couldn't understand how I had gotten so turned around. I knew I hadn't gone that far from the entrance, but now it felt like I was in a completely different part of the asylum. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a split second, I felt a rush of hope. Maybe Jason or Ellie were texting me, checking in. Maybe I could use the GPS to figure out where I was. But when I pulled it out and looked at the screen, my heart sank. No service, not a single bar. I should have known better. This place was a dead zone, no way to contact the outside world. Frustrated, I shoved my phone back into my pocket, only to hear a sudden creak behind me. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It was faint, but unmistakable, like the sound of a door slowly opening. I didn't want to turn around, but I had to. My body was trembling, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I couldn't help myself. Slowly, I turned the flashlight back down the hallway I'd just come from, and there, halfway down the corridor, was a door I could have sworn had been closed a moment ago. Now it was open, just a crack like it was inviting me to step inside. My pulse raced. I wasn't about to go near it. There was no way I was walking into another room, especially one that seemed to be opening on its own. But as I stood there, paralyzed by indecision, I noticed something. A light, faint but definitely there, coming from inside the room. It wasn't the harsh, artificial light of my flashlight. It was warmer, softer, like the light from a candle, flickering gently in the darkness. My heart was hammering in my chest, but I forced myself to move. Slowly, I edged toward the door, keeping my distance, just enough to shine the flashlight into the room. What I saw made me stop cold. The room was different from the others. It wasn't trashed or decayed like the rest of the asylum. In fact, it almost looked lived in. The walls were clean, the bed neatly made, and on a small table near the window was an old oil lamp, its flame casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. But there was something else. In the far corner of the room, there was a figure. It was hunched over, its back to me, sitting on the edge of the bed. I couldn't make out any details, but I could see enough to know it was a person. At least it looked like a person. For a long moment, I just stood there staring. My mind was racing. Who could it be? Another trespasser? Someone like me, caught up in the dare and stuck in this nightmare? Or was it something worse? Something I didn't want to know the answer to. I didn't call out. I didn't make a sound. Instead, I slowly backed away, inching down the hallway as quietly as I could. My flashlight flickered again, and for a second I thought it was going to go out completely. I turned and hurried down the corridor, not caring anymore which way I was going. Just wanted to get as far away from that room as possible. The hallways seemed to stretch on forever, and the panic was starting to get to me. My chest felt tight, my breathing fast and shallow. I had no idea how much time had passed. It felt like hours, but I knew it couldn't have been that long. I kept thinking about Jason and Ellie waiting outside, probably wondering where I was. But there was no way I could explain this to them. They wouldn't believe me. Hell, I wasn't even sure I believed what was happening. Just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I saw something up ahead. A door. Not like the others. This one was bigger, sturdier, and slightly ajar. Light spilled through the crack, soft and warm, like the light from the outside world. The exit. Relief flooded through me. I was so close. I could get out of here, tell Jason and Ellie that I'd made it through the dare, and leave this place behind forever. But as I approached the door, something changed. The air felt different, heavier, like it was pressing down on me. And then I heard it again, the whisper. "Don't leave." My heart stopped. I whipped around, shining my flashlight into the dark hallway behind me. There was nothing there. No shadows, no figures. Just empty, silent darkness. But I knew better now. I knew that something was there, watching, waiting. I turned back toward the door. I wasn't sticking around to find out what wanted me to stay. I reached for the handle, my fingers trembling, and pulled the door open. I yanked the door open with shaking hands, half expecting it to slam shut in my face before I could get through. But it didn't. The door swung open smoothly, revealing a narrow stairwell that led down. The soft, warm light spilling through was coming from below, giving me a sliver of hope that maybe I was finally close to getting out of this nightmare. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my footsteps echoing off the walls. My breath was ragged, and my heart pounded in my chest. But the thought of escape pushed me forward. The air was different down here, warmer, less suffocating than the hallways above. I felt like I was finally leaving the cold grip of the asylum behind. When I reached the bottom, I found myself in a small room. It wasn't anything like the decayed, crumbling mess upstairs. This room was normal, too normal. The walls were painted a soft beige. There was a worn couch against one wall, and a wooden table in the center with an old-fashioned lamp sitting on it, casting the warm light I'd seen from the stairwell. It looked like a waiting room you'd find in any regular hospital or clinic. For a second, I just stood there confused. How could this room even exist in a place like this? It didn't fit. Nothing about it made sense. But there it was, calm, clean, almost inviting. And in the corner, there was another door. This one was marked with a faded sign that read exit. I couldn't believe it. This was it, the actual exit. I was almost free. Without thinking, I crossed the room and grabbed the door handle. As soon as my fingers touched the cool metal, something in the back of my mind screamed at me to stop, to wait. But I was too desperate to listen. I just wanted out. I pulled the door open and stepped through. And instantly, everything changed. The warmth, the sense of calm, it vanished. I was no longer in the cozy room. Instead, I found myself back in the asylum, the familiar cold biting at my skin. The hallway in front of me was long and dark, just like the ones I had wandered through before. My heart sank. No, 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 no. I whispered, my voice trembling. This couldn't be right. I had just found the exit. I had been so close. I turned around, thinking maybe I had somehow taken the wrong door, but the small room with the lamp and the couch was gone. In its place was just another endless hallway, its walls peeling and stained with age. My stomach twisted with dread. I was trapped. I hadn't escaped at all. The asylum had tricked me, lured me into thinking I was free, only to pull me deeper into its twisted nightmare. Panic surged through me as I ran down the hallway, hoping to find some way out, some crack in the maze of corridors that would lead me to freedom. But with every step, the building seemed to shift, the walls closing in, making the corridors longer, narrower. The whispers started again, faint at first, but growing louder until they surrounded me. "Stay with us." I shook my head, trying to block them out, trying to keep moving, but it was like the asylum itself was alive, and it didn't want to let me go. My flashlight was sputtering again, the beam barely cutting through the thick darkness. I stumbled through the endless corridors, my mind spinning. Was this even real? Was any of this real? Just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I saw it again, light. But this time, it wasn't the warm, flickering glow from before. It was harsh, blinding, like the kind you'd see in an operating room. I turned the corner and found myself staring into a large, open room. At the far end, a single door stood slightly ajar, with bright light pouring through the crack. This had to be it, the real exit. I ran toward the door, the whispers following me, growing louder and more insistent. Don't leave, stay with us. But I wasn't listening anymore. I just wanted out. I pushed the door open and stepped into the light. For a second, I was blinded, my eyes struggling to adjust to the sudden brightness. But then, slowly, the world came into focus. I was outside. The cold night air hit me, and I breathed in deeply, relief flooding through me. I could hear the sound of crickets, the rustle of leaves in the wind. I was standing on the front steps of the asylum, the same steps I had walked up an hour ago. The old, decaying building loomed behind me, silent and dark, like a tomb. I stumbled down the steps, my legs weak, barely able to hold me up. Jason and Ellie were standing by the car, waiting for me. Jason's face lit up when he saw me, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Dude, you made it," he called, jogging over to me. "I told you it wasn't that bad." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My head was spinning, trying to process everything that had just happened. It felt unreal, like a dream, but the cold sweat on my skin and the racing of my heart told me otherwise. Ellie walked up, her arms crossed, a look of concern on her face. "You okay? You look, I don't know, freaked out." I nodded slowly, not trusting myself to speak. I was out. I was safe. That's all that mattered. But as I turned to look back at the asylum, something caught my eye. There, standing in one of the broken windows, was a figure. It was just a shadow, but I could feel its eyes on me, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what I had seen in there, what that thing was, but one thing was clear. I hadn't left alone. Jason clapped me on the back, laughing. "See? Told you there was nothing to be scared of. Let's get out of here." I nodded again, forcing myself to smile. But as we got into the car and drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me, that the asylum had let me leave, but only because it wanted to. As the car sped down the road, I glanced back one last time. The asylum stood there quiet and empty. But in my gut, I knew it wasn't over. Not really. I had escaped, but some part of me was still trapped inside.